So he's with us for another 2 years, still the secretary. And Tom, welcome back. I also want to welcome Karen. Karen Verico is a new member, and we all know Karen, and she's been on this podium and on these meetings a good number of times in various capacities. And we know what kind of work she does, and we're very proud. We had the executive meeting this morning. She's already making a really good contribution. And she will continue to make a contribution if she can keep Cliff out of her way. Oh, good. You were keeping him out of your way. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the outgoing board member, and I see Gladys back there. Gladys, thank you for all you did for the board. We appreciate you so much, and I can tell you one thing. Every single minute of the day, she was thinking about Smith Ranch Homes, how to make it better, and with that, we appreciate very much. Now I'll call the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Smith Ranch Homes Board of Directors open session, and I'm opening it up at 2:02. Now we want to have the minutes of the last meetings, and Dean's going to do that in Tom's stead because Tom was on an excused absence. He was sailing the ocean blue, playing bridge for a week. So, but he did call in a couple of times for things. But anyway, Dean's going to substitute for him as secretary for now.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. A month ago, we met with our double session, executive session in the morning and the open session in the afternoon, December 17th. And at our executive session, we got a Villa water damage update, as we have been late. That is the important item on our agenda. And we have another one today that we can share with you. And we met with our Coldwell Banker team and went over the 2024 sales statistics. And let's see, we talked about our 5-year alarm system contract with Convergent. And we had some personnel issues. And you know, it's legal issues and personnel issues that we talk about in the closed morning meeting. So we talked about exempt performance appraisals and the salaries to go with them. And let's see, I think that's it for the morning meeting. And then in the afternoon meeting, still on December 17th, the open meeting, we talked about workers' comp insurance renewal. We talked about unit duct cleaning. We received several art donations from the Fletchers and floral arrangements from Jan Friedman. And I think that concludes the highlights of the December meeting. And then we go into January. And we did convene in order to open up the counting of the ballots on January 14th. And the inspector of elections and the poll watcher and the ballot counters took on the work. And then that afternoon, we did have our annual owners meeting. And we will correct those minutes a year from that meeting. So they aren't on the docket for today. The last set of minutes I'd like to introduce are the January 21st minutes of our Board of Directors special open session. And that's when we elected the officers among us. We are all elected to serve, and then we decide among us who will be the officers. And so we again elected Glenn Phillips to be our president. I'm the first vice president. Karen Verical, our new member, is the vice president. I don't know, the vice president. Garrett Schultz is again our treasurer, and Tom Bertelson again our corporate secretary. Also at that meeting, we did the annual signing of our board of directors ethics policy, and we all signed that statement for another year. And we appointed Gary Schultz and Karen Verico to meet that state requirement of the board's duty to inspect the association's financial records. And you hear that report at each of our monthly meetings. And that's very important to homeowners associations, that our finances are always monitored. And let's see, other actions at that meeting were that we did appoint Karen Verico to continue as the ad hoc long range planning committee chairperson for a period of 6 months, at which time we're going to review the leadership and see where we want to go with that. And then we did appoint each of us to be liaison to a number of committees. I won't go into that, but you'll see us appearing at the various meetings that we nominate. And we will now be working on the committee rosters for the next couple of months, getting new people to join our committees and so forth. So I would like to move approval of the aforementioned board minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Gary seconds. Any discussion? Tom, you got anything to say? She stole your thunder.
I think Dean should be the.
Well, I won't go that far, but she did do a good job. Thank you, Dee. She filled in last minute here when Tom reminded us that he was not here for the last board meeting. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Now, we're very pleased to have Sean Berry with us to provide an update on the water damage situation. That's a very important piece of business that we're all very involved in. And Sean is our project manager. He's also a member of the staff at Danmeyer Waldorf. Started to say Walmart. Danmeyer Waldorf, and that they've been our long-standing architectural firm. We're very pleased with the job that Sean has almost become a member of our staff, and he's done a huge amount of work, and we appreciate it, Sean. So Sean, kind of fill us in, and then I'm going to open it up for questions about the water damage situation to the residents.
Okay, we live? Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Kind of, sort of?
It's a little.
How about that?
Yeah.
It's definitely on.
Just projection.
Okay. So over the last month, we've been doing a lot of work on the exterior. That's been our main focus. We've done a lot of work on the interiors too.
Can everybody hear him?
I'm just gonna take it out, the stand. It makes it easier, right? Okay, so mainly the exterior, we've been working on between units on the villas. We've been working between units 695 and 699, and then 701. 701s that had the 701 and 705 are the two that have the primary interior damage. So we've gotten most of the work done between the 695 and 699. It's just ready for planting. So all the drains are in, everything's been regraded, so everything slopes away from the buildings and to the new drain. So that is primarily done and just ready for replanting. The main work that's happening right now is between 699 and 701. They've got most of the drain lines in. We have had some discoveries during this process that we're now in the process of correcting. One of the primary drain lines from the existing drain lines that ran between the buildings was severed at some point in below the walkway. So all of the roof loads, all of the loads that were coming into that pipe were essentially just dumping into the ground. So we've now, we've met with a civil engineer on site today. We have a firm plan together to get the fix done. And they'll be executing that probably end of this week, first thing next week. So that'll be now fixed. We found another couple issues that we're going through and correcting, that we're also injecting water into the soil, which it's through, as it's stressed throughout this process, it's not any one single thing that's caused these issues. It's multiple things added together that have caused the problem, and we've been addressing them as we find them throughout the process. So that's the main components on the exterior. We should be wrapping up the majority of the work on between the units and out through the walkways end of this week, next week, and then we'll be working on a few of the locations in front. Once that's done, we'll be moving on to the rest of the villas and the rest of the condos. As you may have noticed throughout the last several months, they've been pulling soil away from the edges of the buildings because we've had soil over years built up and in direct contact with the sides of the exterior insulation system, what looks like stucco on the outside of the buildings. So over the last several months, we've been pulling all that soil away, and now we're prepping up to put new drains and locations to drain all the exterior around the buildings. You may notice above at the 400 right now, they're actually putting in stone in those open pits. They're starting to put stone and rock throughout those open pits. So the two reasons for that: A, water can come across the top of the soil, get into the stones, and then drain out to the drain basins at the proper locations where it wasn't able to do this before. And it makes it much easier to maintain over time because you can, if there's debris on top of these gravel paths, these gravel areas, easy to clean off and easy to see when it starts to build up again, so this doesn't happen again. So that's the main thing with this. And once the engineering firm that's doing the work between the villas is done with that work, they're moving on to the condos to get all that work done. I think that's it for exterior. Back to the villas interior. They're working out right now. They're working on all the tile. They've got the floors done in the tile floors done in 705. They are doing the shower enclosure. So over the last month, they've waterproofed all the showers, they've waterproofed the floors, they've done all the floating of the floors, and now they're actually doing tile on the units. And this end of this week, beginning of next week, they'll be actually putting the rest of the flooring in throughout the villas. That's the update on the villas.
Okay, any questions of Sean? We got Aaron Levy here.
When can we expect that the displaced residents in the villas and finally move back into their villas?
We've had some delays with the cabinet company. So it's actually looking like end of April is about what we're looking at right now. But, and that's mainly, everything is gonna be done and they will be waiting on the cabinets.
It's a long time.
It is a long time, I agree.
Sean, they can't move in while they're doing cabinet work.
Because of there's a lot of liability because they'll have unfinished surfaces.
Oh, well,
There wouldn't be a single working faucet in the entire because it's cabinets that are holding all the faucets and sinks. It's not worth. It's better just to have them move in when it's completed.
Sarah Jensen.
Is there going to be any testing for water damage in condo ground level units that seem to have similar water problems than have been found at the villas?
Most of them, it's a different condition on the condos than it is on the villas. The majority of the water intrusion that happened on the villas was because of how the slab construction was done. The condos are built with a what's called a post-tension slab, so it's a much thicker concrete slab, and it was constructed in a different way that doesn't have water essentially sitting underneath the buildings.
So you're not going to do any testing for interior damage in condos?
Yeah, I think we have not seen any demonstrated results through our workthroughs to warrant deconstructive testing in any areas that would exhibit concerns.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have seen water build up in these troughs as they have excavated the dirt away. And they've seen standing water up against the building. Can you describe just how that water up against the foundation is different than up against the eaves or the
Yeah.
exterior?
Yeah, so part of what we've been doing is pulling that, so until we started removing that soil, you've had water against the edges of the eaves system for years. We've actually, when we had the eaves inspected, and that was one of the things the eaves inspector actually recommended, and that's part of what triggered moving forward with this process. So there's only one location, I think there's actually 2 locations that when eaves actually intakes water, it actually stains through the eaves system. So how the eaves system is constructed is the outer layer is a thin layer of waterproofing, and then there's a layer of foam, and then 2 more layers of waterproofing on the inside of that. And that outer layer of waterproofing actually runs down the wall and returns back to the foundation. So that seal, the entire insulation surface is actually sealed back to the foundation. And that's why even with the water that's been in contact with the building for decades, that's why it hasn't actually intruded in, except for 2 small locations that we actually have to open up as part of the eaves repair that we've been working on.
Sean, you don't see any risk then, I presume?
No, not, especially not now. Now that we've actually, we have the soil away, so even if the eaves system does get wet, it can dry. So it allows it to actually breathe where it couldn't before. Basically, it was like having, basically having water in contact because that soil was wet as long, pretty much all year because you had irrigation and you had water from rain.
But with pulling away that dirt, we don't see that standing exhibited to warrant any water damage behind the eaves.
Except for 2 locations.
Yeah.
2 locations.
Good question though, Sarah, thank you. Jerry Lewis?
Have you already done a full assessment of the additional work to be done on the condos?
What do you, regarding,
Just any work to be done on the condos? You said you're moving on to the condos.
yeah, okay, so the work that we've been doing on the condos right now is removing the soil from that's in direct contact with things. All of that has been done. There's also been channels dug for the for those troughs, those areas, those low areas next to buildings to drain out. Anywhere we can't have it mechanically drain out, just naturally drain out, we actually have to put in drain basins. And that's the part, that's what I'm saying is the next phase. To actually install drains where you can't naturally drain away from the building. On the backside of, say, 400, we've dug basically a trench on the backside of 400 that will get filled with gravel. That naturally slopes down and doesn't need to have a drain installed because there's drains on both sides that it can drain to. This building over here, building 300, on the back side of 300, there's nowhere for that water to go. You'd have to trench a drain 25 feet to get out into this grassy area. So instead of trenching across, we're going to put in a drain to catch that surface load.
Do you expect any surprises like you determined recently on the villas?
100%.
5%.
100%.
That, yeah.
No, as you dig it up, you can't, you don't know what you're going to find. So we had several locations where we dug up that the eaves system was buried a foot deep in the ground. So over time, it had built up. We, in several locations, we did tests, it was only 4 to 6 inches. And then we found other locations that were a foot deep. So you don't know, until you start opening up, there's no way to know until you actually start digging it up.
And once it's all fixed, somebody mentioned a 6-month testing of the drain system. Will that be all encompassing?
It'll be, so there's two phases to it. The reason, like I said earlier, that we're making it obvious the areas that need to be maintained. The other thing we're doing is around every drain basin, we're putting these round rocks. And you'll actually notice them around the complex now. But we're putting, it's called riprap. So it allows water to pass through, but it stops sediment. Part of the bi-yearly walkthrough is to make sure that all those locations are actually staying maintained. And the trenches that are now being dug are open and not covered with debris.
We had another question back here, Jerry. Jan Friedman.
Okay, that's fine. I think, well, I'm.
Thank you. There's been a long-standing, yellow crime scene tape being, sandbags next to the 200 building on the side door.
Right.
It's an eyesore that has been there for months and months. And I asked maintenance and they said something about, well, it's not a problem, it's Landcare's problem. Well, I saw John and other people standing almost shoulder deep into this giant hole. There has to be some solution. And I'm just wondering when this is gonna get handled.
Is this even in your purview though?
Yeah.
Oh, it is, okay.
Some of it is. So I think what you're talking about is the trenches along the edge of the buildings, correct?
It's directly outside 1M. There's sandbags up against Mitzi's patio, but then there is a very large hole. But John can describe it.
Sean, this relates to the question I asked earlier this morning. This hole and this damage was a result of a break in the fire suppression system that created erosion, and the water pressure was so much that we had to sandbag Mrs. Combs' unit. We called in Landcare, we called in Centerville Fire Department to shut off the fire suppression. That has been repaired, so the work to be done in the soil in the landscaping area is under the purview of the landscape contract with Landcare and not the villa or residential building reconstruction.
Yeah, so that is an area that needs to get filled in. Obviously, that was an area where the amount of water volume basically excavated a hole when that line fractured.
You know, we could do a lot of things. We could do a lot of inspection work. We could do a lot of different things. But every time we get ready to do something, it costs money. And that costs you, the residents, money. I would hate to have to come back to you and say, well, we've done a lot of inspection work. It's gonna be another $1 million. And we just don't want to do that. We don't want to be a penny wise and pound foolish. But at the same time, we want to be respectful of the residents' money.
What's nice is that we added a number of allowances during our funding plan, the emergency assessment. Sean and I have talked that we're still within those allowances. What we really see at the end of this is that we're still gonna have a punch list of items that we're gonna wanna get to over the next 1 to 3 years that we can prioritize and budget and reserve for. And then Dan Meyer, his firm, is gonna give us a playbook on preventative maintenance scheduling every 6 months, every year, so we can stay ahead. So that'll be the nice outgoing material that we can have that we can then schedule around.
Right. Good, yeah.
Any other questions?
But no more surprises, Sean, please.
Yeah, I'll keep doing it.
Okay. Sean, thank you very much, and we appreciate what you do for us, I'll tell you. Now, Mr. Gary Schultz, our treasurer, will tell us where we ended up the year of 2024 and a couple of other items on his agenda. So Gary, I turn it over to you, my man.
Thank you. Before I stand up, let me just get the duty to inspect out of the way. As Dean mentioned, we have a new subcommittee of the board now, consisting of myself and Karen, to do the inspection of the financial records each month. And I'll report that we did that on Friday and found nothing of any consequence or arrears. So I would like to move that the inspection be for the month of January be approved.
Do I have a second? Nobody gonna second? Been moved and second. Any discussion on the duty to inspect? All in favor of approval? Aye. Any opposed? The motion is carried. Go ahead, Gary. Okay. This is a good part. Or the bad part.
Could you feel the stress of Monica and Scott just now as we were getting this projector together? This worked well a minute ago. Gary, you're on though. I'm gonna move your slides from here.
Okay, so I don't have to touch it.
Please don't.
Okay, how's the volume on this? Not good? Maybe I turned it on. How about now? So as you can see, this is the report to the open board meeting on our financial situation for the year 2024. So moving right in. I wanted to start by recapping the last 2 months, November and December, for a couple of reasons. One is that because of the timing of the board meeting in November was early in the month because of Thanksgiving, we didn't have a financial report in November. So I wanted to include that information to show you that we weren't deliberately omitting it. And also, I wanted to show you how we're ending up the year. So as you can see, first of all, we have operations, which is everything except dining. And you can see that the revenue for November, December, pretty similar. And you subtract the reserves and you're ended up with about 700 and some thousand of net revenue. The expenses, you're all familiar with expenses, maintenance, resident services, housekeeping, administration. They do vary from month to month, but in total, they come out pretty close to the same each month. So then you subtract those expenses, and you end up with net revenue, 13,000 for November, negative 17,000 for December. And then they compare that to the budget below. See the budget numbers. And then the variance you see is negative. So for the 2 months, we were below budget and net revenue for those 2 months. And I've been telling you all year long that we're expecting to end the year on the downside because the way that the expenses are scheduled during the year. So then we turn to dining. You'll see the revenue up top. The revenue, of course, is almost, most of it is just your dining revenue, dining dues. And then we have expenses, we have the cost of goods. We have compensation, other expense, total expenses, you see 324,000, November, 349 in December. So then you subtract those expenses and you get net revenue, 21,000 in November, 8,000 in December. Versus the budget numbers down below. So we did better than budget in dining, and you'll see we ended up in November plus 14,000 and in December just about almost break even. So now we turn to the full year. What's that?
Might need to stand on one foot.
This is for the whole year. And you'll see budgeted and actual and variance. You see operations revenue, 10 million, roughly, a little over 10 million. Very close to that in terms of the variance, 41,000. For that amount of money, it's practically right on, it's a break even. And the dining, the same situation. We have a $4,200,000 revenue and budget the same amount. And we're very close to being right on spot with dining as well. So for the total revenue then, we're in over $14 million. We're gonna be over 15 this year. And as you can see, we have a negative revenue variance of 27,000, which is very, very insignificant. So now we have the department expenses below, and they're combined here. So you see the first four are operations and the last two are dining. And you can see that there's very little variance here between the budget and the actual. Really good job of managing to the budget for all the departments this past year. So we ended up with a net variance of 277,000 positive for expenses. So we underspent the budget and expenses by 277,000. So we subtracted that the reserve contribution, which is what we do each month that goes into the reserve account. And then we end up with net revenue. And so here you see this negative, and together with this positive, gives you 250,000 net revenue. And I'll be talking more about that in a little bit. I wanted to put this in here to show you that over the course of the year, you'll see that the monthly variance, from profit to loss or surplus to negative each month varies. It could be negative 1 month like June, in August, positive like in July. And so you go through all the year, and then over here, you have the cumulative total. At a high of 400 and some thousand back in July. And then as I mentioned, we were going to, it went down from there. And then we ended up, actually that's 250, but 250,000 at the end of the year. Okay, what about that 250,000? What causes it? It's not that complicated. 4 items, 5 items basically make up, 4 items make up the total. Here you have meal revenue plus 50,000, housekeeping compensation 69,000. That's because good management by Lila, we managed to be under budget just about every year with housekeeping. And this year was no exception. Patrol services was a bit of a little bit more complicated. As you know, we have contracted patrol services out. So the contract with them is that if we're short people, then they can't supply everybody that they're contracted to supply, then the people that are here will work overtime. And the contractor will pay the overtime, not us. So that's so happened that because after the COVID and the shortage of personnel, and people willing to take jobs, we had a shortage of people. And so that's what happened this past year. So that's a positive to us of 70,000. Yeah, medical benefits. We can likely thank Scott for that, because he instituted a new employee health benefit program now, where we went from a large corporation base to a small corporation base, or is it the other way around? Anyway. So that now that instead of everybody being rated equally, everybody rated on their own age and experience and so on. And we were able to save $76,000 last year by going to that. We have an increase that the board just approved for this coming year. But even with that increase, we're still way below what we would have been had Scott not made that change, and all the employees being willing to accept it and taking it all in good faith. So we ended up with essentially the same amount. It makes up that $250,000 working capital positive. Okay. Okay, this is an important chart to take a look at. Here we're comparing 2023, year before last, and last year, 2024. You see two very different years here. Start off with operations. In 2023, with a negative 16,000. This year, positive 179,000. Dining services, huge negative that year. Remember that year we had to make a mid-year correction to the assessment because we were way out of balance with the budget? Well, it worked. This year, with the correct budget and the correct assessment, we ended up with 71,000 positive. So that gets you your total. This is just a little bit off with $250,000 positive. However, let's look at the year-end cash situation. 2023, we had negative cash, 19,000 negative cash at the end of the year. We took out a loan from our reserve account on one month's contribution to the year account. So we took out that loan, and we reported net cash at the end of the year of 104,000. We needed that loan in order to make sure that we were gonna not run into a problem paying the bills. Now let's go to this year. Operations has a positive number in cash. But we paid off the loan. So we paid off the loan this year to the reserve account. So the money just went from operations to reserve. So we ended up with a reported net cash of $93,000. That's still low, but we did pay off the loan, so that's the good news. So the conclusion from that is the finance committee evaluated the financials last week, and based upon all that information, made the recommendation that we retain the working capital surplus of 250,000 this year. We really need it. As you can see, we're down to less than 100,000 in net cash. So we really need it, and it just wouldn't be practical or fruitful to try to do anything other with it, like a rebate or whatever. And I also want to point out that it's not always a good year. You look at this year compared to the year before, you see night and day, plus 250 versus minus 200. So it always pays to be prudent when it comes to maintaining the cash surplus that we have. So, do you want to ask about questions?
Oh, yeah. Anybody have questions for Gary? Okay, Tom Ferguson.
Personally, I find net cash of 93,000 minimal, given the size of our organization. So my question is, for the budget for 2025, what are you projecting as the net cash at the end of the year or the working capital?
Yeah, I can handle that.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So we don't have any line item in the 2025 budget that says rebuild cash balances. We budget to zero. The expenses are defined and the revenues are offset to get to zero. So how can we rebuild off of $93,000? The finance committee has been working together, and the employee retention credit is still an ongoing application that we have a high confidence rating for, which is going to be totaling close to $1 million. Cliff Schulroy and the committee have been in touch with the IRS. There's a lengthy process to go through, but there's a high probability that we'll be seeing that money this year. And so instead of injecting more line items within the budget to try to accumulate more cash, we'd like to see the resolution of that first and apply some of that monies to the balances to grow that, and then whatever other dispositions may be.
Let me also mention that we also have a $300,000 line of credit with the local bank. And we also have access to reserves from the reserve account, should that be necessary.
Tom.
I have a follow-up concern. If we are expecting up to $1 billion, I think in this possible.
Well, I was just gonna say something about that, Tom, if I may interrupt you. That, nobody should count on that money. This is a new regime in Washington. And who knows what they're going to do, if they're eliminating more than they're adding to. So I caution everybody, we'll believe that $1 million when we put it in the bank, okay? So let's don't count on that stuff. Tom, does that answer your question? That's the point, yeah. Okay.
There's an interesting timing aspect to this too, that $93,000, without getting too deep in the weeds, is that that's their amount with the cash on hand plus outstanding checks. So if you were to actually look at our bank account at the end of the year, we had about $300,000. But we had just cut a check run maybe a day or two earlier, of maybe $150,000. So with that net difference on a book, it's $90,000. The interesting thing about Smith Ranch Homes is that your assessment money comes back in within 5 to 6 days of the month. And so we rebuild that dollar amount. So there's only a really short period of time where we're sitting at a lower amount. And I also know that not every check is going to be deposited within 1 day of deposit or cutting the checks. So while there's a concern, and I want to see that number closer to about $300,000, that's the number that we are comfortable with keeping up oil in the gears. But I do want to kind of explain a little of the narrative behind the numbers though too.
Good. Any other questions? I do want to say another thing. There was a 41,000 shortage on revenue this year. And I did some investigative work. And all of that was in the bar, and I found out that Nick Allen quit coming to the bar. All right. Anything else having to do with that? Let's move on then. We've got a reserve action item that Tom is going to take.
Yeah, the subject of the reserve item is one garage door in the villas. And the maintenance committee had reviewed the proposed cost and approve it if appropriate. They did so a week from now, but now let me give you a little history of garage doors and reserves. We have a very detailed schedule of what is projected to be needed to replace or repair item by item, including garage doors. We used a 30-year life, and we're going to fund it in 2 phases. Last year, we had a problem with a door, it had to be replaced. This year, we have a problem with a door. And so we're going to ask maintenance to review the appropriateness of the reserves. Are we finding that the garage doors are failing faster than we had anticipated? In any case, that's what we're going to do. It is a reserve item. It's below the minimum of a 10,000 before we can make a move. But since it's a portion of a series of small items, we're aggregating those items. And the committee maintenance is requesting your approval for the transfer of $4,975, which is the total cost of the replacement of this particular garage door. So I so move on their behalf.
Second.
Moved in second. Any further discussion on the garage door at 7:45? And hearing none, all in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Now we'll move on to the management reports, John and Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mrs. Casey made us commit to keeping this hour, this meeting under 3 hours today, so I'm gonna keep the management report short and to the point. You have my word, Mrs. Casey. Scott Newman reports the annual audit of our workers' compensation and payroll figures has started and will continue through February. Danielle Uhaldi and Dunning Services wants to remind you we're offering a special Chinese themed dinner on February 7th, Friday, February 7th. And the biggest day of the year, at least to my heart, you romantics out there, February 14th, Valentine's Day, we're going to celebrate love and friendship. And from maintenance, Kevin Bauer reports work orders 255 completed in the month of December. Year to date, over 2,700 with only 7 open orders. If they can continue at that pace, they'll do very well. Kevin reports there are 38 backflow preventers that were tested, 6 failed and were repaired and retested, and they are staying on top of that. HVAC, the building 500 electric thermostat upgrade continues, and ASSC now has digital control over the 3rd and the 4th floors. We are making progress in that. I can assure you is welcome news to everyone who works on the 3rd floor. On the exterior, the walkway intersection between buildings 300 and 600 now has a concrete corner extension, and that will eliminate some of the tracking of the carts you've seen. Fire and life safety, the 5-year testing and inspections with Convergent were completed and approved. That new contract is in place. Also, semi-annual fire inspection was conducted by Convergent and no deficiencies were found. Water features and aquatics, the 8-month-old spa heater was replaced. Yes, right, 8 months and it's failing. Who knows? That was replaced with a direct replacement. Water chemistry is partly responsible for the internal damages to the heater. Our water quality here is a high alkalinity and it leads to some corrosion. Good news on the radio department. Repeater was installed for channel 3 and all of our radios are now able to reach 115. Housekeeping, Lila Beck reports. December requests, extra requests for 4, over 81 through the year. And Lila continues to transition as the architectural liaison. She continues to meet with the chair and the members, and they have worked out a new order with green and silk for artificial trees and silk floral arrangements. Looking forward to seeing that in place. Moving on to resident services, Monica Thomas reports the next welcome dinner is scheduled for Thursday, February 27th. Come as you always do and help us welcome our newest residents. Show up in the cocktail lounge at 5 p.m. Monica is also reminding everyone a financial abuse specialist team, or FAST, will be presenting on Wednesday, January 29th in the community room from 1:30 to 3 p.m. I encourage you all to take part in that, get all the information you can get on scamming. As you know, they don't go down, they only go up, they only increase. And respectfully, they prey on the elderly, on your telephones, on your texts, on your emails, phone calls, hard mail, you name it. So by all means, get all the information you can. On scams, Monday, February 10th, all-time favorite at Smith Ranch Homes, at least as far as I'm concerned, Jason Myers piano concert. And Monica, you had a bit of breaking news before the meeting that you shared with me. Would you like to speak to that now, please?
I would. Microphone is dying, so I apologize. I just want to let everybody know that on Thursday, we will be welcoming Sarah Sewell on as our permanent activities coordinator, no longer an agency employee. So we're very excited to have her.
Thank you, Monica. Moving on to the open items list, area lighting. This project has been suspended and looks to reorganize the scope of work in 2025 with new reserve funding. Thank you, Scott. Club thermostats, I mentioned the phase 2 is underway and concrete repairs was also covered. I am going to go back to my report and keep this meeting under 3 hours. Yes, Danielle Uhalde talked to Glenn Phillips and I after the night of history and honoring of Heidi Kraling, and she said, and I have to agree, that the energy, the positivity, and the appreciation in the air and in the dining room that night was better than New Year's Eve. And New Year's Eve is supposed to be the biggest night of the year, so we agree with you, Danielle. This is from Heidi Kraling herself, our guest of honor. What fun we had. I will tell you before I read it, she came into the kitchen unannounced, and Abraham and I were there, plating up one of the last courses. And she said, "Oh, my wooden table, it's still here." And I said, "Yeah, this causes a lot of problems with County of Marin Health. You're not supposed to have wooden tables in your kitchens anymore." She said, "Don't move it, don't give it up, don't get rid of it." I said, "No, we won't. It's here. But many other things are here in the kitchen that you originally designed." So that conversation led to Heidi Kraling asking me to work for her. And I'm going to. You know me, there's always a punchline. Come on now. Give me a pause, one beat. So I'm going to be assisting Heidi Kraling in her soup kitchens over the holidays this year. Thank you, Heidi. Here's the message finally from Heidi Kraling to all of us. Oh, what a night. A big heartfelt thank to you for the over-the-top hospitality. Delicious, delicious food and warmest of welcomes. John, your menu was so yummy and decadent. Wow, perfectly executed. Okay, wow. Danielle, the service was so attentive and kind, and so are you. Jerry, thank you for hatching this plan in the battalias. So many months ago, we had the best time. You and the team really put on an impressive amount of time and energy into the history of Smith Ranch Homes. Long may it run so beautifully. All the best, Heidi.
I don't know if everybody knew it or not, but Heidi Kraling, while she was an intern, worked for Bob Battaglia in his pasta shop on Chestnut Avenue. What year was that, Philip? In 1983. So that's how far they go back. So that's pretty good connection, I'd say. Okay, that's. Scott, you have things to say?
Oh, I couldn't top that.
Oh, you couldn't top that, okay, all right, I didn't think you could. We'll move on then to the seismic report, and that is Scott. Scott's gonna tell us about, earthquake insurance is skyrocketing.
Boy, John, you got the Heidi Kraling write-up and I get the earthquake evaluation write-up. How did that happen?
The cost of earthquake insurance is just going through the roof. So we're looking at some alternatives and Scott's gonna tell you.
Yeah, and let me touch, this is actually coming by way of the finance committee and just a little housekeeping. Gary, I really appreciate the sentiments you made during your treasurer's report, and I thank you for including me in the medical benefit evaluation, but I really want to attribute that to the finance committee. Cliff and his team looked at all different levers to pull during a time that we recognized we had to redo a budget for dining, and they looked at all fronts. And so I just want to kind of say thank you to the finance committee for really pulling that, because that realized some significant results. One other thing that was in my management report that I couldn't talk, Heidi, is much more of the priority, but maybe not. Maybe you're going to look to tune into the Warriors game tonight. Anybody want to watch the Warriors game on TV at home tonight, 7 o'clock against the Utah Jazz? Well, I didn't know that Comcast was going to completely change their lineup package and all of a sudden carve out a new tier called the Ultimate TV tier, which for somebody at home who likes to watch his Giants and Warriors, all of a sudden I turned on the TV and they weren't there anymore. But they would be if I upgraded to a new tier and paid a little bit more money. I did immediately reach out to our account manager for our bulk package here at Smith Ranch Homes. And the minute he picked up the phone, he said, "You're calling about the sports, aren't you?" I said, "Yep." So Brent Hara is a good fella. He is working with us, and what he is working through is getting a number of communities like us who feel maybe a little misguided that we just renewed our package just a couple of months ago. And while it may be an extra step in the process, he's compiling a list right now and he's tendering it to the corporate offices to reflect the number of senior communities that are now kind of having a change up and no longer having access. If you really have to watch the Warriors tonight, you can call Comcast and upgrade to the tier. We do also expect that corporate will be looking at this and ruling on this by the end of next week. And our assessment is that there's a highly strong likelihood that they will absorb us in a contract renewal to include this tier at no cost to Smith Ranch Homes. But we've got to wait the process, and I'm hoping it's a week. We also know that if that does not work, we have 300 units that can take out a piece of paper and start writing a letter. And I'd like to go to Plan B and not allow Comcast to kind of take what we had. So we're working on it. I'll update you as we go through, but we may need your participation if this is something we want to continue with. So
You said it was not an increase in fee. My understanding is it's $50 a month.
So there's always a promotion or two that you can work through. Ultimately, you'd be holding the bag to cover this. The good news is if this community said, forget sports, it actually lowers our current rate that we have now because we don't have the sports package. But ultimately, we're working through to get us back on what we signed on the dotted line back in October and at no change of cost to us originally. So hang in there. We're hearing your feedback and we'll update you as we get more updates from Comcast. Now, earthquake insurance. So indeed, as Glenn alluded to, $940,000, let's call it $1 million, is budgeted in 2025's budget for our insurance package. Earthquake insurance alone is close to $400,000 for that premium. Only about 4 or 5 years ago, that was $160,000, and it has increased wildly year over the last few years. With these costs in mind, the Finance Committee is looking at some strategies on property insurance and liability, maybe increasing the deductible and start reserving for some ideas. Look at ways to skin the cat. Earthquake, though, we did feel that let's evaluate the entire earthquake package here and revisit a study that was conducted about 25 years ago, by a firm that did a deep dive into Smith Ranch Homes. That firm still exists, and they're anxious to work with HOAs because they see a need that HOAs are facing a very significant insurance package. But what do you get for that insurance in relationship to what is our true probability and loss here? So the Finance Committee is still working. They don't have a recommendation to the board today, but they're hoping to get a package to the board maybe in the next week or two as an emergency action to work with EQE Consulting to process the seismic evaluation so that when we look to renew our property and earthquake insurance in March for our April 1 renewal, we may be able to see some different strategies on our earthquake package and maybe reducing the costs, but also looking at what our liabilities may be by doing that. So what the finance committee is really looking is to get an early vote of confidence or interest from the board to proceed on this package, because it is a significant effort. We have $15,000 in the budget to work with a seismic consultant, so we were anticipating doing this. Their preliminary cost is coming in at approximately $35,000, and that's still open for negotiation. But I would like to tender this to the board for any questions they might have about the program, or if we can move for a motion to support the finance committee's endeavors thus far.
You'll hear a motion to that effect.
I move.
Second. Dean second. Any discussion on that? Hearing no discussion, all in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Okay, I'm the liaison for the nominating and election committees. And today we're gonna announce who the new standing chairpersons for the 2025 committees, which start March 1st. March 1st? Yeah, okay, which start March 1st. I'm gonna read this to you. So last year, Smith Ranch Homes appointed standing committee chairpersons in January, while the rest of the committee rosters would be approved in February. This successfully provided the chairpersons, especially new chairpersons, with enough time to prepare for the new committee year, starting March 1st, and attend the leadership session in February. The list of 2025 chairpersons I will give you. And these have been approved this morning in no, I guess they weren't approved, they were, okay. Activities, you know, my list is not right here. Anna Maria, you're not gonna be, right? Oh, the middle column, okay. Jake Solomon. Thank you, Jake. The Appreciation Committee is Sarah Garbarini. Architectural, Lynn Brown's coming back, and she will be the chair of the Architect Committee. In dining, Sandra Norberg. Finance, we brought Cliff Schulroy back for a 4th year in finance. There's some things going on like the ERC that Scott talked about. There's several things going on that we think Cliff needs to be involved in, so we brought him back for a 4th year. In the Landscape Committee, Barbara Ager. Maintenance, Jack Holmes on for another year. And the Welcome Committee is Mary Harris. I open the floor for a motion that we approve these standing committee chairs. Been moved. Second. Any discussion on it? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Okay,
Glenn, you wanted us to nudge you in case you didn't mention the next leadership meeting for these chairpersons.
You told me to do that and I didn't do it. Okay.
So just as an FYI, we are not holding a February town hall meeting. In place of that, we're gonna have our chairperson leadership meeting. So if you heard your name listed today to be approved, we're gonna have a leadership meeting on February 11th, that Tuesday at 2 p.m. in the community room. And we'll go back to our regular town hall meeting programming in March.
Written out here, I just didn't read it. I didn't finish reading the memo, so sorry about that. Okay, now we move on to the emergency call system. Everybody, I get a lot of questions around the campus on what are you doing about the emergency call system? So, Tom, or Scott? Tom, are you doing the emergency call?
I'm doing a pool.
Okay. Scott, you're doing the emergency call system, whether you
Sure.
like it or not.
Yeah. What name did you have there, John? Was that mine? Okay. Scott Newman. Okay, well, yeah, I just wanted to report on what the board took action on today, earlier this morning, is that the community is certainly asking what's going on with our red switches. It's not just a functional operation or amenity that we miss, but it's also potentially a liability that we need to really address. It's also a potential marketability of Smith Ranch homes into the future. So the board heard the questions, they understand the concern. There's $50,000 in our reserves this year, not for a replacement program per se, but it's for a study on what is the next iteration of our emergency call switch system. So the board approved the concept of a work group. Going to be led with with Jack Holm likely leading the way. Jack, you probably haven't even heard about this until right now. You're not here today, but you'll be hearing this through the grapevine. But I think the goal is to really get Jack and Kevin Bauer working together along with another small group of residents to work with Kevin to try to find what is the next program. In the meantime, this is a great mock-up that Karen gave me. There's a major concern that I have with having those switches still available in everybody's unit. We don't know which units work, and if they're working today, they may not be working tomorrow. And to have them still available is a liability that I don't feel comfortable with. So we're gonna be working with the maintenance department and the residents in the coming weeks or so to get these plastic covers on the switches so that there's not a misinterpretation of, oh, there's a switch in my house, it must still work. We're gonna also include a concise little tag that just defines that it's inoperable, just because we want to really cover our bases that we've communicated clearly to the residents. But what we really hope with this work group is move forward with this. And in February, the board's going to come back with a recommended roster that they're going to appoint along with the charter, and then get this work group mobilized. And hopefully in the very short term, we can find what is the next concept of emergency call systems that fits Smith Ranch Homes' needs now and in the future. I hope that covered everything, but I'll turn it back to the board if there's any holes that I missed.
We don't need to vote on this yet. So, Tom's gonna talk to us a little bit about the pool. The pool is costing us to heat during the winter time a lot more money than we thought that it was. And so Tom's gonna address that right now.
Yeah, we installed 2 new heaters a year ago, and the maintenance committee wanted to figure out what is the cost of running the heat in the pool and the spa month by month. And they've diligently done that. Kevin has provided the data, they have analyzed it. In the months, it was below expectations, candidly. But in the months of November and December, the pool was costing us approximately $10,000 per month to heat it. So it's a near-term decision or recommendation. The committee said, on rainy days, who's going to swim really? And by keeping the covers on the pool, you're going to retain the heat and there'd be less heat generated to keep it warm. This will not impact the spa. It's a much smaller unit, and for health reasons, that will continue to be open from 10 to 4. So that was the recommendation. The board discussed it this morning and concurred that as an immediate action on our part, we would leave the pool cover on if in the morning there was rain in the forecast. It's not a perfect solution, but it's an interim one given the magnitude of the cost. We try to balance all issues. We've asked now the maintenance committee to go back and make recommendations on the hours throughout the year, etc. So anyway, those recommendations would come to the board and for discussion in an open session. And I think there probably would be a period of time of hearing all residents as to appropriate recommendations from the maintenance committee. That's all I had on that subject.
Okay, Tom. Any questions on that? Colette?
Wait for the microphone if you don't mind, just so we can all hear.
It's more of a comment that relates to the subject. In the summer, when it's been 90 degrees out for months, the pool has been so hot, some of us get nauseous and have to get out.
That's been recognized and will be part of the maintenance committee's study, not only study, but implementation.
Great, thank you.
But we talked about that this morning in executive committee. Gladys, I figured you would have something to say about that.
I have nothing, no comment against it. My problem is we need a pump for the cover so that when it rains, we can get the water off.
Gladys, we have 2 sump pumps that, I talked to
Oh, good.
maintenance and, they can put them on the pool cover. I didn't realize they
I
could.
couldn't do
Yeah.
either.
They pump it into a drain to
Okay,
get it away from the pool.
that was my only concern. Oh, there's another one. You didn't mention a chair for the community relations.
No, we're suspending that right now until we can get somebody in that position.
Are you also suspending the ad hoc committee roster?
Well, that is to be decided what we're gonna do on that. We said that Karen was gonna take the long range plan committee for another 6 months until we figure out if that's gonna be moving forward or you. We've got some things to do on the ad hocs, but we did get all the standing committees, and that's the agenda, as it said, standing committees.
Thank you.
Yeah, just as a reminder, the ad hoc rosters continue over the years. They don't term at any particular period. There was also, I think, an eyebrow or 2 that I saw. The rest of the standing committee rosters are gonna be approved at the February board meeting. So we take care of the chairs in January, and then we circle back in February to approve the rest of the rosters for the standing committees.
So that we can include the chair in the development of the standing committee.
Getting back to the pool, it currently, or up to now anyway, has been our policy that when it's likely to rain, then the procedure is to take the cover down. Because they didn't want water falling on the top of it and then making it impossible to retract. Turns out that's not, apparently from what we've just been told, that's not really an issue. If it's a mild rain, it just drains, it just slides right off into the pool. If it's a heavier rain, we've got the pumps to deal with it. So this is kind of a reversal of what our current policy has been. And I think it's gonna save money right off the bat, because from a financial standpoint, opening the pool when it's gonna rain is a big problem from a heating standpoint. So this may be right off the bat a help.
And Gary's always figuring out how we can save money. God bless him. Okay, any other questions? I'll be going to the open forum. I do wanna, Tom's got a question.
Just a recommendation. In the IJ today, one of the featured stories concerns us, and that is the implementation of the immigration. And for those who have caregivers, I suggest that you study it. It's very concerning, it should be.
Okay, any other board people with something to add?
Since you brought up the IJ, I think it's just worth noting that in February, you're gonna see a great representation. Jerry Lewis and I have been talking to the Marin IJ about promoting our pending acknowledgement of being a top community in Marin. So I think the publication date is in mid-February, I believe, for their special insert. And Jerry and I need to talk about that, but just wanted to give you a heads up that before the next board meeting, there will be a nice promotion of Smith Ranch through the Marin IJ.
Okay, I want to open up for any question you might have. It doesn't have to be on any subjects that we've discussed already today. We've got one here.
Yes, is this on?
Yeah.
This is related to the red, buttons in our units. I, about 8 months ago, got locked in an elevator in the 100 building, and when we pushed the number, it rang and rang and rang and no one answered. So my question is the elevator connected or disconnected? And the second question is, 2 weeks ago, a neighbor's smoke alarm in their kitchen went off due to some cooking issues, and no one called or checked on that. So do we just assume that we're totally on our own, that nothing's connected at this point?
Well, I can take the elevator phone first. That's a hardwired direct to the gatehouse. And so I do want to follow up on why, because the gatehouse should be operated 24/7. So that's unrelated to the ECS system entirely. As for the smoke alarm, the smoke systems are not part of the ECS systems issues that we're talking about. The smoke alarms and the fire systems within the buildings operate normally. In terms of what are the procedures when somebody's smoke detector goes off within their units, that is something that's not tied into a building-wide fire alarm mechanism. It's really localized within the unit. If that was to happen in somebody's unit, and they were to see that there is a significant issue, and we probably need to bone up on our fire evacuation policies, but if one left their unit and pulled the fire alarm closest to their unit publicly in the common area, that would activate the fire alarm system within the building to let your neighbors know there's a significant issue.
Other questions? Thank you, Mary Ann, for that question. Nick Allen. You can buy me a drink anytime, Nick Allen. Well, Bruce Morris, looks like we are getting done under 4 hours. Marguerite Casey, under 3 hours. 2 hours and 15 minutes. I now declare this meeting adjourned. 1 hour and 15 minutes.